Today is the return of Maud on the accelerator. Yes. That's the pedal on the right. Oh dear, oh dear. I'm currently working on a video on Heidi, my hearing aid beige Mk1 Mk2 Escort, where maximum effort is resulting in very slow progress. Today, I'm going to be taking a break from all that to do some well overdue shuffling around with my other old banger Ford Escorts. And I want to see how much daily driving has taken its toll on my favourite car, Esther, the ST170 powered Mk1, including showing you some damage that she's sustained. If you're a regular viewer of my content, click the like button now because it's a massive help. Alternatively, if you're new to the channel, click subscribe now and welcome. I'm Marcus Hayes, and today is the return of Maud, my Mk2 Mk2.
Alright, we are on the road for what could quite possibly be the last drive in Esther for 2024. But we're in November now, and I think it's definitely time to tuck this thing away and let her hibernate for the winter. Who out there noticed the very depressing issue that I've got on the front end of this thing? And I'm not talking about the intermittent fault with one of the side lights either. But for those of you that missed it, I'll show you when I get to the other garage. It is a depressing issue, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. It's only a car and everything can be fixed. But yeah, I've got mixed views really about tucking this thing away for the winter. You know, this is a much better car to drive than Maud is. I will of course be putting Maud back on the road for another winter before I strip her apart and rob all her bits for Heidi. Although I'll probably gradually start robbing bits from her throughout the winter anyway. But yeah, this thing is a much better car to drive than Maud, so I'm not looking forward to reminding myself how much of a piece of junk Maud is, but it is what it is. I'm grateful that I do have Maud to drive through the winter so that I don't have to drive this thing. But yeah, as I say, I've got mixed feelings. You know, I'm glad to be tucking this thing away. I feel like she deserves to be tucked away for the winter, and I've got a lot of jobs that I want to do on this thing over the winter, and I'm looking forward to diving into those jobs relatively soon, although at the moment I am going to try and keep focusing on the Heidi for a bit. And look, today I do want to have a good look over this car, and I'm sure that the list of jobs is going to grow once I do have a look underneath and stuff and see what's what. Now, I do think that this engine is tired. Maybe some over-fueling issues has caused a bit of bore wash, and that's why I now think that I've got too much crankcase pressure and stuff. As I mentioned in a quite recent video, I have been messing around with some of the settings on the ECU to do with like the cold settings and the cranking settings. So I've taken a bit of fuel out of those sort of bits of the map, which definitely seems to have improved things in terms of the car doesn't stink of fuel when I'm normally driving, and there's definitely less times that I've noticed that there could potentially be a load of smoke coming out of the back of the car when I boot it. But I do know that sometimes these issues can just be an intermittent fault, you know, with a sensor or whatever, so it could just be a coincidence that the problems seem not as bad since I've messed around with those settings. In fact, yesterday when I left my other garage in this thing, it failed to start, and I had to clean the plugs to get it to start. So that could indicate that there still is an issue with the fueling or with something on the engine like a sensor that's causing it to overfuel. I don't know. One thing that I have sort of thought of the other day, and I haven't tested yet, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to test it, to be honest, is the fuel pressure regulator. You know, if the fuel pressure regulator is not working, that will mean that I've got too much fuel pressure. And with an injection setup, your fuel pressure kind of determines how rich your engine's running, right? In terms of the map, right? You know, if you keep your map the same but increase the fuel pressure, it's basically richening the whole map. So that's one thing that maybe could have been causing all my issues all along. I don't know. I'll have to have a look in my garage to see if I've got like an inline fuel gauge or fuel pressure gauge that I can hook up today maybe and see. But other than that, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a go at rebuilding this engine throughout the winter, which is going to mean the car's going to need to go and get mapped again anyway. So part of me is thinking that whatever this issue is, I don't necessarily need to solve it if it's going to be going on the rollers at some point again anyway. Although it is always better to figure out exactly what's going on with your engine before you know, rebuild it or whatever. You know, just to have that knowledge. And yeah, I'm definitely going to be hopefully doing a compression test on this engine today. My beautiful girlfriend Kat is going to come over and help me do that. So yeah, we'll at least somewhat be able to get an idea of the health of this engine before I ultimately rip it out to do a load of work on this car over the winter. Another thing that I've noticed relatively recently, and it's something I've noticed in the past, so I'm pretty sure I know what it is because I've been able to solve it in the past. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to show this, but basically if I'm off the accelerator and then just sort of tap the accelerator like that, it sounds and feels like maybe the engine's moving about too much. So maybe, potentially, not for the first time, maybe Esther has spat out an engine mount bolt or something. But, you know, that's one thing that I'll be able to confirm or not when I have a look at this thing when we get to the other garage.
All right, so I had to lose the hat and hoodie because I'm actually getting a bit hot, but I am wearing thermals. It's so hard to know how many layers to put on this time of the year. Anyway, I digress. Esther is definitely looking a whole lot better than she was, but she's nowhere near perfectly clean at all. I just didn't want to tuck her away in the garage for the winter, absolutely filthy like she was. I actually decided to remove her front bib spoiler just because she's a nightmare to get jacked up with this thing fitted. And I'm actually thinking that maybe another job I should do this winter is sand this thing down and re-lacquer it because, yeah, there's definitely seen some abuse. And in fact, I've often thought that maybe it'd be a good idea to get all of the carbon fibre re-lacquered on Esther and then get it wrapped in some PPF or paint protection film. But maybe having that done to all of the carbon would be, yeah, well beyond my budget, who knows. But the front bib spoiler is definitely the piece that gets the most abuse from stone chips and stuff. Now, I think before we start digging and looking for every little bit that's wrong with this car, it's time to have a look at a very depressing looking front end because her front panel is damaged yet again. But this time it wasn't due to some idiot crashing into his own security post. This I actually didn't realise happened until one of you guys mentioned in the comments that yeah, she had a bit of damage, and it's just going to mean that the front panel is going to need painting yet again. Although I am going to be chucking a bit of paint about when I solve this issue, and this is the major thing that I'm kind of looking forward to doing on this car. The plan is to remove the heater bubble, remove this bracket, deal with this rust and deal with any surface rust that is inevitably going to be beneath the heater bubble, and then this whole back of the engine bay at least will get resprayed Olympic blue, and then I'll be fitting a new heater bubble but not a blue metal one. Put your guesses in the comments as to what material Esther's new bubble is going to be made out of. But yeah, when I deal with this, I can also deal with this and get it painted all at the same time. But for now, let's see if we can improve things by just pulling on it. Not really. This metal's going to need to be heated up and shrunk. Yeah, it's got a bit of a dent over here as well. In fact, you can see this is where it's been hit. You can see like a bit of a scratch there.
But, you know, the front panel does have a load of stone chips on it. You know, the front panel, just like the bib spoiler, does see a lot of abuse. So once that's all fixed, it'll be nice to have a nice fresh front end. And while we're at it, we can deal with this, which again happened not at the same time this did. This happened quite a while ago now. Obviously someone's grazed the car whilst they're parking. And it's these kind of things that are inevitable when you're using your favourite car as a daily. It is what it is. Very avoidable, just don't use your favourite car daily, but yeah, these things happen. Now, a couple of really minor things on the exterior. We've got one missing centre cap for the Revolution alloys. We've got one missing windscreen wiper. The blade actually came off on the way to an event earlier in the year, so I pulled the arm off just so that it doesn't scratch the windscreen. And I've got to dig out the bit of paper that I've got somewhere that shows the part number for these wiper blades, because originally this car would have had chrome wiper blades. I painted these black, need to redo them. And someone basically sent me a pair of these wiper blades which sort of fit on to the chrome style arms. Not ideally, because, you know, one did fling off, but yeah, they're black rather than chrome. So yeah, need to get a new pair of these and yeah, potentially sort of glue them or attach them on in a better way, so that it doesn't fly off in future. But yeah, in general, there are a few sort of little stone chips around the car, mainly lower down. You can see one there. Obviously, loads of tyre always built up here from burnouts. So yeah, potentially, maybe I should see about getting sort of the lower bit of the body resprayed. It's certainly nothing that I need to worry about immediately. I don't think. This car was painted so many years ago, so I'm grateful that it still looks in relatively good condition. It certainly passes the 10-yard stare anyway. I'm sort of remembering things as I go round, and there is one thing on the interior that I want to sort out. These seat rails, they're a bit rattly. There's a sort of plastic roller thing in there, if I remember rightly, which is basically missing. I think both sides on this one and only one on that side, or maybe one side on this one and not on that one. Yeah, the passenger side one is a lot better, but yeah, this is really bad. And I actually kept the seat rails when I sold the seats that were fitted to Heidi recently, which I'd already painted up and stuff, and you know, they don't rattle like these, and I kept those because I intend to fit those to this car, because this is a late Mark 1 which uses the same seat runners as a Mark 2. I've still got a really decent set fitted to Maud at the moment as well, which aren't all painted up and stuff. So yeah, I've got two decent sets of rails and one not so decent set. Although I might actually end up putting some sort of rally style mounts into Heidi at some point, and I've actually got a set of those rally style seat rails already that were given to me by a subscriber called Andrew when I went to visit him. But yeah, elsewhere in the interior, I'm definitely getting some surface rust coming up, sort of where the seams are, where the bits of metal meet each other. And a great solution for this would be to fit a carbon fibre parcel shelf and a carbon fibre sort of firewall. Yeah, we'll have to see if funds allow for that later on. But other than that, in terms of the interior, I think I need to do a better job of attaching these carbon fibre door cards to the doors. Maybe use some bigger screws, or potentially put some riv nuts in, because yeah, these do vibrate about quite a bit. But yeah, other than that, I'm quite happy with the interior, although I am always getting messages from people saying that I should fit a roll cage to this thing. Maybe one day, once I get some carbon fibre doors and a carbon fibre roof. But those bits would require quite a thick wallet. All right, so I've just been looking underneath this thing and I haven't found anything majorly wrong. Oh, in other news, my beautiful girlfriend Kat has arrived to help me with the compression test. I was actually going to give the whole of this underneath a degrease, but yeah, I'll do that another day. I did just do this little bit though, gave it a quick wipe, and you can see how well it comes up, even though this was painted, I don't know, 15 years ago maybe, the underneath. But I think it's inevitable, before I bring this thing out next year, I'm going to have to go around and touch up any areas that need it. This is quite bad here. We've got quite a lot going on this leading edge of the leaf spring mount, and just in general there's loads of little bits that need touching up. So yeah, that's definitely a job for the list, but there's nothing major under here in terms of, you know, corrosion or whatever. Although I did find one little bit. It's just here on the passenger side rear floor pan. Now I'm pretty sure this area was one of the areas where we patched inside. And when we did the floors, we sort of tried to hide the welding if you're looking from underneath the car. But we didn't bother hiding the patches inside because I was actually going to run a carpet on this car, but then changed my mind. So yeah, that is still metal, but there's a sort of divot in the fiberglass and stuff we put on the outside, you know, to try and make this sort of fake channel to make it look like it hadn't been done. And I think doing all this fiberglass in on the floor was a mistake. You can see here we've got a bit where the fiberglass has cracked. So I think, you know, with any flex that goes on in the floors, it's just not advisable to use fiberglass filler to make things the right shape. So yeah, definitely need to dig that out and yeah, dig out this crack, and I'll probably just put sealer in there instead of more fiberglass, because sealer is flexible. But yeah, that does look very rusty, but I'm pretty sure that that's double skinned inside. But as I say, considering how many years ago this thing was painted, and considering the abuse that this thing now gets, it's still looking really good under here. Now there is something I want to show you to do with her rear axle. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before on the channel, but it's definitely one of the jobs that I want to crack on with during the winter. And this is something that's happened to Maud as well, but a lot worse. If you look at this sort of saddle bit here, the bit on top of the lowering block, you can see that it's a bit curved just from the force of the U-bolts, probably where they've been over tightened. And what I intend to do on this car, and on Heidi in fact, is put a plate that goes from this tube to this saddle. So a piece in here of really thick metal, and the same on the front, and that should brace this area of the axle, and yeah, it will straighten out that bit. Obviously you bang that straight while you're doing it, and it will prevent things like that happening in the future. So yeah, that's another job for the list. But I have actually potentially found something else wrong in terms of the axle, and I think that explains the symptoms that I was getting, that I showed you earlier on, which I thought might have been caused by an engine mount being loose or worn. Because with the car in first gear and the handbrake down, and bearing in mind that this thing has an LSD fitted, if I put the camera here so that you can see the prop shaft and this tyre, if you see how much you can move this tyre before the prop shaft actually moves, and you can hear the prop shaft making a noise, but to me that seems like quite a lot of movement in the wheel before the prop moves. And the fact that I'm able to spin this wheel forward and the other one is spinning back whilst the car is in gear, that don't make sense to me. Surely with the car in gear, the wheels should sort of stop spinning, and I'm pretty sure that the other wheel shouldn't be spinning backwards the same time that I'm spinning this one forwards. I'm sure that's how an open diff would behave. So yeah, maybe the diff needs completely rebuilding, and maybe that was the noise I was getting when I was sort of stabbing the accelerator. I don't know. As always, do let us know in the comments what you think. In terms of the engine mounts, there's no bolts missing or anything like that. They're absolutely fine. And it's a similar story on the driver's side mount. But we do have quite a major coolant leak, which looks like it's coming from the water pump. I did notice that I was losing coolant recently, and I did notice this staining around here, and I did nip up the radiator hoses. I haven't checked the coolant since, to be honest. Yeah, radiator's dry. So yeah, based on what I can see when I'm looking underneath, it looks like the water pump is leaking coolant, and that's what all that staining is. But with me potentially rebuilding this engine in the winter, the water pump would have been something that I'd replace anyway. So yeah, I'm not worried about that at the moment. But yeah, whatever movement I could feel or hear is definitely nothing to do with the engine moving. It's absolutely solid in there. All right, so I've whipped the spark plugs out, which are looking very black and fouled. And I've disconnected the coil pack, which is sitting just below the inlet manifold. And yeah, I'm going to test the compression with this thing. It's not as good as the ones that you screw into each spark plug hole, but this is a really quick way of doing a compression test. My beautiful girlfriend is going to turn the key and keep her foot on the accelerator. Yes. That's the pedal on the right. And we'll see what numbers we get. This thing always only makes about 120 PSI. I've had some people say that ST170s read a bit low on a compression test compared to a Z-Tech, and some other people have said that theirs read a lot higher. But yeah, we'll just see if there's any cylinders that are lower than the others. All right. It's about 110. It's about 110. That's just under 100, and that's about 100. So yeah, even lower than the 120 or 125 that I've got in the past. And the back two seem a bit lower than the front two. I'm sure when I compression tested this before and did it again, but when I put oil in the cylinders, the back two came up really high. They were lower than the front, and then yeah, they came up really high compared to the front when I put oil in. I'm not going to bother doing another test with oil in today because, correct me if I'm wrong, but putting the oil in and then doing the compression test is to see if a low compression is being caused by the rings, and if I rebuild the bottom end, then the rings will definitely be getting changed anyway. And I do suspect that it's the rings that are worn because I'm getting too much crankcase pressure in this engine, because I keep getting oil coming out of here when I boot it. Although maybe this catch can is a bit small, so that might not be helping things, but yeah, really shouldn't be getting oil coming out of the breather here. And it's worth noting actually, just before I got here today, I put my GoPro on the back of the car and then done a couple of pulls, and I was able to confirm that yes, I am getting smoke out of the exhaust, but it's blue. So maybe with me worrying that this smoke is being caused by over-fueling, because I had that issue before when the coolant sensor wasn't working properly, because if that doesn't work, the ECU thinks the engine's super cold and adds a load of fuel. But yeah, maybe the smoke that I'm seeing more recently in my rearview mirror when I boot it sometimes is just blue smoke, which, you know, is caused by burning oil, which could be because of worn rings, etc, etc. So yeah, it was kind of good that before I park this thing up for the winter, I've kind of confirmed that yeah, the smoke I am getting probably is burning oil rather than it being burning too much fuel. That doesn't explain why these plugs are always black whenever I take them out. And I do wish I had some sort of fuel pressure gauge so that I could test whether this fuel pressure regulator is working properly. But yeah, for now, I've got a ton of things that I want to crack on with on this thing in the winter. So it's time to dig Maud out. And yeah, I just hope that she runs after all this time. Maud was a bit buried in Esther's garage, behind a load of parts and tools. It didn't take too long to dig her out though, and I found a few bits along the way. Those seat rails I was on about earlier. Got to switch this battery out. This actually belongs to my good friend John, but it has now gone flat and it don't really fit in this car properly, so. With my fully charged battery fitted, it was time for the moment of truth. Oh dear, oh dear. Would she start? Oh dear. It was getting a bit dark inside the garage, so I pulled her out to investigate and started by cleaning up the earth point on her inner wing near the battery. But when I put it back together and tried to start the engine, it still wouldn't start. With the battery disconnected again, I disconnected the wires to the starter motor and cleaned those up, as well as the terminals. And I found that the terminal for the big wire on the starter was actually loose. With it all back together, it still wouldn't start, so as a last resort, I refitted John's battery, and success. Finally. Oh. It's running sweet though. All right, into a new day, and you'll be pleased to know Maud did make it home yesterday. This morning, I've switched out John's battery for this other battery that I had. I knew that one of the two batteries that I had wasn't very good, and I charged them both up and basically took the wrong one with me to the other garage yesterday. But yeah, this one works absolutely fine, although maybe this starter motor is going to bite me in the backside eventually. The little threaded bit where the main wire goes onto is loose. I mean, the starter motor is still working, but yeah, I'm worried that it's going to fail at some point. Maybe I'll be able to dismantle that starter motor and just tighten up what I assume is a nut behind it. Yeah, we'll have to see. But yeah, for now, everything's working sweet. And I can take John's battery back over to him today, because I'm going to be heading over to the other garage now to crack on with what I've been up to on Heidi. All right, it's official. Maud is back on the road for the winter, which I'm happy about, because it means that I can dive into doing all the bits that I've already mentioned on Esther at some point this winter. Please excuse the noise in the background. This car is now running a very worn out diff and very worn out half shaft bearings, which came off of Heidi, but it's absolutely fine. It'll enable me to drive the car, and that's all that matters. It's not about ragging this thing at all. It's about just cruising it so that I've got something to drive to and from my other garage with, basically. But yeah, I have been reminded about everything that's wrong with this car. I need to remember to keep putting it in gear when I park it up, because I sort of ghetto converted this handbrake to a fly-off one. It pulls to the right when I brake, yeah, the alignment isn't great, but the front legs on this, I've got 2.8 Capri front legs on this. There's play, I think it's the shock absorber within the body, and apparently there's these little like brass, I think, sleeves or like bush things that you need to press in. So yeah, definitely need to do that, because I'm planning on putting these front legs on Heidi eventually, or maybe I'll sell these either before or after rebuilding them and get Heidi some cheap coilovers. I don't know. So yeah, in terms of alignment and driving straight, this car isn't great, but it's fine. As I say, you know, she drives, that's the main thing. Other than that, she's junk. She's starting to rot away and needs some TLC, but that will be for the next owner once I sell this thing as a bare shell. And I'm always getting messages from you guys saying, oh, you know, when's Maud for sale? Can I have first refusal? Like, so it looks like, yeah, there's going to be a queue of people waiting to purchase this shell potentially when the time comes, but that is a long way away. I need to get through the winter. I need to rip all the bits off of this thing, and then yeah, think about selling up. But yeah, one thing I do like about this car, to be fair, is although it's slower than Esther, the way it pulls is really nice. Because the bike carbs on this aren't the biggest, it kind of makes power sort of low down and then runs out, you know, sort of towards the top. So it makes it feel really torquey. And also, the gear ratios on this are a bit better than Esther, it has to be said. Esther's still quicker, it's just that she's way more free revving, and yeah, the gear ratios are a bit more revvy than this car. So yeah, you sort of get a nice sort of low down torquey feeling with this car, which is nice. But as I say, Esther is clearly a lot faster. I mean, what's she, half a second quicker or 0.8 of a second quicker down the quarter mile? So yeah, considerably quicker. But I like how this engine feels when you put your foot down. But yeah, other than that, this thing is absolutely junk. I'm obviously re-familiarising myself with all this interior. We'll be taking a lot of this and fitting it to Heidi, the flocked dash, the carbon switch panel, etc, etc. And I've got some ideas going through my head about how I can improve on Heidi's interior versus this one. A couple of things that I kind of always wanted to do on this car but never got around to it, which is, you know, the basis really of Heidi, right? To make her into a better version than this car ever was, using a better shell than this shell is now. So yeah, plenty to crack on with all the cars moving forward, and I'm looking forward to continuing on this crazy life that's dominated by my love for my old school Ford Escorts. And I'm very grateful to all you guys that regularly tune in to follow what I get up to. But for now, I am going to end this video here. Massive thanks as always to everyone who's tuned in. Do give it a thumbs up if you thought it was any good. If you didn't, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Check the links in the description to follow me on Facebook, TikTok and Instagram. I'll leave a link to my website down there for any of you guys that want to grab some official MH merchandise. Also, I'll leave a link to the Petrolhead Style website down there if you want to grab any other car related clothing or products. My email address will be down there as usual for anyone who wants to contact me. Huge thanks as always to my patrons for your ongoing support. But other than that, until next time, thanks for watching.